Hello class. Today in this video we're going to take a look at how to read a spectrogram in Isotope RX. And so right here I've got RX elements open, and you may have a copy of RX element depending on what semester you're watching this video. If not, we have RX elements in the computer lab at Valencia downstairs, the open lab. And then in the larger rooms we have RX advanced if you check it out on an iLock. And typically in my day-to-day work I actually use RX all the time. I'm starting to use it just as much as Pro Tools, if not more, and I'm usually in RX advanced, and there are actually more modules over here to utilize in RX advanced, but this is RX elements, and it's still wonderful to learn on because it still gives you access to the standalone version, and you can still learn how to read the spectrogram. So that's what we're going to do today. So before we jump in, let's first take a look at the waveform. If we use a slider over here, so this is the waveform, and this is what you're used to seeing in audio, and from this you can gather time from left to right and amplitude, but not much else. You can't see what frequency is being played within the audio file. Switch back to the spectrogram. And so this is where this is going to make the biggest difference. So what I've got here is an audio file that is pretty silly, but I made it especially for this project because it'll be good to learn on, and you'll really easily be able to see what you're looking at, and then know how to read it going forward. So in this first quarter of the file, I've got this sine wave playing. I just played it out of Serum, going up in semitones, so you can just see what that looks like. So this, oh, by the way, at the bottom, this is time, and then over here on the right, this is frequency. So let's go ahead and just play that and have a listen at what's going on. Okay, so you get the idea. So you can see that this sine wave is just moving up incrementally, and you could actually line up its fundamental frequency with the frequency over here. And there's actually an easier way to see what frequency you're on if we can just, well, let me change this setting right here. Had it set at default because I know that yours would open up on default. But if you wanted to change the frequency scale to log or extended log, it will provide a little bit more separation and a little bit, like, you'll be able to see the bass, what's going on under 300 hertz a little more accurately. But for right now, I'll put it back on what it looks like on yours when you first open it. So we're back on mel for melodic. So that is just a sine wave, and you'll notice there are no harmonics going on really. It's a sine wave, so we wouldn't expect there to be. So on the last one, it's playing this note, and then right after that I tried to sing just that note so you could see what that looked like. So here's the sine wave, and here's my voice being recorded. And as you'll see, this digitally created sine wave versus my voice singing the same note, it looks a lot different. First of all, there's harmonics, and second of all, there's a lot more broadband noise in between everything. So let's just take another listen. So this is what it's going to look like more often when you're just pulling in audio from real life situations and not digitally created audio. So after that, I just sang one line because I feel like singing is easier to see. The melody moves a lot slower. So here, take a listen to this. This is my melodic material. You're absolutely welcome for that performance. I know it was great, so don't say anything about it. But and you could see me going flat right here. But that's what's amazing about RX is that you can actually see melody and you can see things changing pitch. So take a look at this right here. Is melodic. It's like going down. Material. All right, so as you can see, you're starting to kind of pick up, like, here's the fundamental note I'm singing, and here are the orders of harmonics above it. So dialogue, I wanted to show you singing in a sine wave first because dialogue looks a bit more just riff-raffy, like it's harder to follow a fundamental note. So here's some dialogue, and this is just me reading a page off of Wikipedia, I think. Maybe I say it at the start. Here's an example of some non-melodic material, just dialogue. I'll read a sentence off of Wikipedia. A fast Fourier transform is an algorithm that computes the discrete Fourier transform of a sequence, or its inverse. Fourier analysis converts a signal from its original domain, often time or space, to a representation in the frequency domain and vice versa. Yeah, so as you can see, if this would have been the first thing that we pulled in, it would have been a little bit harder to understand. But now we can see from like the sine wave demonstration and me singing one note in this that the fundamental frequency of my voice is around here, the lowest one right here, and then everything above it is just harmonics. And so with RX, you can actually do what's called spectral filtering. And so, for example, if I just make a selection right here, and then I press this play button, it will only play back what's in the selection. So let's see what that sounds like. All right, that wasn't very impressive. Here's another example. A transform is an algorithm that computes the discrete Fourier transform of a sequence, or its inverse. Fourier analysis. And so what's amazing about this is you can begin to single out little things that you might not like hearing, and using the tools within RX, you can actually filter out just that frequency. And so for example, say if I found something right here. Oh, by the way, zoom is I think if you don't change the shortcuts like I have, which is why I'm stumbling here, it's command minus and command plus, like in Pro Tools. So let's say if I just thought that this for some reason sounded like it was a rogue noise that wasn't supposed to be there. There are a few things you can do, especially with RX Advanced, to remove it or to mask it. But for this one, for RX Elements, you're a little limited in choice, but you can press Shift S, and that will insert silence. With the selection that we made, it's not going to sound that transparent. Here we go. Transform of a sequence, or its inverse. But you can begin to imagine how powerful it would be if you hear, something going on up here that shouldn't be there, and you can just be like, Shift S. Or in RX Advanced, there's a module called Spectral Repair, and it has more intelligent algorithms to kind of remove it without making such a big difference. And it'll just mask what you've got going on. You can either generate you can synthesize new data to fit in whatever you're trying to get rid of, or you can attenuate it based on what's around it. RX will look at it and say, hey, that doesn't look like it's supposed to be there. It's not in the selection around it, so I'm just going to turn it down. But with RX Elements, we can still, we can get by with learning. So the next thing I did was just play some pink noise here. All right, sorry if that was loud for you. And so that is for your project, which I will explain in a second. Your project has, I'll explain it now actually. Your project has two parts. And the first part is you're going to denoise the dialogue in this file. So from here to here, don't worry about the singing part before, and try not to select the pink noise too when you're doing this. But I'm going to show you how to go through that process. So we'll open up this module over here called voice denoise. And then we're going to take it out of adaptive mode, because if you can teach voice denoise the noise profile, it will be more accurate if you have the luxury of just silent noise to teach it. So what I mean by that is at the end of this file, there's just some dead air, which is like my laptop fan running. I have a laptop from 2012 that I refuse to give up. So it's in the background of this running. And if we actually make sure we're on this tool right here, because it'll select everything within that time. This one's called the time selection tool. This one is the time frequency tool, and this one is the frequency selection tool. And so just make sure you're on the time selection tool. So you want to make a selection of, the goal is to make a selection of just noise to teach the noise floor. So like right here, it looks like I might have a mouse click or something. Ideally, you want to ignore that because it's kind of like a false trigger. What I mean by ignore is not select that. So we'll see if we can just get a little bit of noise only. That's fine. I heard a little knock at the end, but based on my experience, it's not really going to affect it too much. Okay, so we've got a selection of noise, and then you're going to click the button Learn. And now you've taught voice denoise what the noise is. So it's learned it, and now what you're going to do is you may need to move this module aside and then zoom out and make your selection of the whole entire file or entire portion of dialogue. And now what you can do is preview it. Here's an example of some non-melodic material, and you might have noticed that it's already decreased, but at this point you're going to play with these settings, the reduction and the threshold, and until you get some results that don't sound like you're causing too many artifacts from the noise removal process, because it is filtering out all of those frequencies that you taught it. So have a listen, and here's an example of some non-melodic material, just dialogue. I'll read a sentence off of Wikipedia. A fast Fourier transform is an algorithm that computes the discrete Fourier transform of a sequence, or its inverse. Fourier analysis converts a signal from its original domain, often time or space. Okay, so let's go ahead and render that. And let's look at the difference again. So I'll press Command Z, before and after. And let's have a listen. Here's an example of some non-melodic and before. Here's an example, and after again. Here's an example of some and you can still hear some in there. You could experiment with pushing it a little bit harder to see how much you can get away with it, how much you can get away with. When you start to go too hard, it kind of just starts to sound like a little bit like this. Like there's strange artifacts from comb filtering. So it's kind of, you have to just make an artful decision of how much is too much and just do the best you can with removal. So that'll be part one of your project, and then, or assignment. So just remove the noise from the dialogue as best you can. And then in the next part of the project, or I'm sorry, your assignment, I'm gonna have you go to this pink noise, and then for this, if you've changed your spectrogram to log or extended log, you might want to change it back to melodic for this one. The next thing I'm going to do is have you choose the little paintbrush tool, and I want you to, if you click and hold, it'll bring up the size, so you can adjust the size. And then I'm just going to have you write your initials. You'll notice if I try to make another selection, my first one disappears. So to get around that, all you do is hold Command. I'm sorry, that didn't work on Mac. Okay, it's Shift. I'm sorry. Hold Shift, and then just keep going. So write your initials, and then press Shift S. And then have a listen to what it sounds like. Here's mine. And that may sound silly. This may sound like a silly assignment, but I'm having you do it, one, so that I know that you opened the spectrogram and didn't do this in Pro Tools. And two, it'll just get you a little more used to hearing what it sounds like when certain frequencies are filtered out. So play around with that. And then you will export your audio file. You would just go to export, and you can turn dither off for this, and you can just export the wave, and that will be what you turn in. Okay, well, I hope this has been a helpful introduction to the spectrogram. Let me know if you have any questions. Just send me a message in Canvas and I'll get back to you.